Now, we all know that one of the easiest ways to reach out to leads is literally picking up the phone and calling them, but it's incredibly hard to do this at scale, and ultimately you need a numbers game if you want to have a huge amount of success with this. Inside our platform, one of the main systems that we give to clients is called the lead calling system. This literally allows them to ring arguably thousands of leads every single day without it essentially ever reaching a bottleneck. So the way that this works is inside the platform we have on the left inbox. Inside inbox we have what's called manual actions, and you notice when this loads up we have what's called let's start on the right. What will then essentially happen here is we can add a step into automations called manual action. What this then does is it automatically adds that lead into the lead list. The lead list here on the screen will literally just be leads, 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 leads. What it means is you can then come in, you can literally click let's start on the top right and literally start calling. And what it will then do is it will literally fire through and ring one lead after the next lead. So it means you can then sit back and literally just dial leads. So you're not then wasting time in between. But the best part about this is we then built the systems in the background to allow you to literally ring every lead 5 times across numerous different days without you having to manually add reminders. You then don't need to try and figure out when you're calling it each lead next, because that just wastes a huge amount of time. It literally means that all you do is you come in, you click let's start. Every lead that you need to ring for that day is in that list, and you're never having to faff around trying to add different leads to certain times. You'll then notice inside the platform on opportunities, we then have a board called the lead calling system. And in this board, we have different columns. For example, we have different columns for different days of the week. So for example, when you would ring a lead for the first time, it would automatically add them into the initial section, and then it will automatically move them along to the next day of the week based off when they next need to be called. You don't have to touch this board, you don't have to do anything. It literally just automatically moves them across. And when that day then comes around, so for example, if it was Monday today, and I was in this Monday list, it would then add me into that manual action list. So I then get called that day. It means you can run this at scale because you're not having to track every single lead and remember when you need to call them next. You'll then notice that we have additional days of the week all the way through to Friday. We could add Saturday and Sunday, but generally we get the best response rates calling people Monday to Friday. At the end of this, we then have a contacted follow-up section, which I'll show you the SOP in a second that we give clients. So they can literally take the SOP, put it in their business, and literally get another team member to do it for them without having to necessarily spend loads of time trying to figure it out themselves. They literally just take the SOP and we then train their team member on it. You'll then notice as well that we have additional sections, for example, dead lead and consult calls scheduled. The dead lead section is essentially when we've rung a lead 5 times, the system will then automatically not allow them to go back into the calling list because there's better leads to be prioritized. It will move them into the dead lead column and stop them going back in. And then on this call, essentially this is a triage call to try and book in a sales call. This would then, when a call is booked on that call for a sales call, it will automatically move the lead into sales call scheduled, so then that can then be handled and closed accordingly. Obviously, leads that scheduling a call, we don't want them going back into the calling list, so that will then stop them going back into that lead list and they're not getting rerun when they've booked in a sales call. If they book in a sales call, we then want whoever's taking the sales call to handle the follow-ups and the closing. We don't want the triage team to essentially be triaging that person when they've already booked in a call. Now, the cool part about all of this is inside automation on the left, we have the lead calling system, which is literally pre-built. You don't have to do anything. It's all built for you. And the best part about this, in our platform, you don't have to worry about things like Zapier where you end up having to pay loads and loads for more tasks essentially that you automate. The cool thing with this is you can get unlimited automations. So the more leads that you add in, it doesn't essentially cost you more to automate. So we'll jump into the lead calling system. Now, the cool part about all of this system is there's an endless amount of automations that run it, but there's literally nothing needed from the client side when they come on board because essentially everything's ready to go. They can literally just jump in and start calling leads. So I'll show you how the system works and potentially it's something that you could then put in place to start outbounding to leads. So the way that the calling system works is you click let's start, it rings the first lead. When that call has ended, the automations will work in the background and you will then be presented this option here that you can see on the screen that you have to tap to then allow the system to then call the next lead. It then means that you can mark an outcome and the system can do what it needs to do in the background before then the next lead calls. So for example, if I rung you as a lead, I had the call ended. I then literally click on one of the options, either you didn't answer you were busy, I hit your voicemail, or I completed the call. And the way that we work this is if someone clicks no answer, this is then selected if the lead obviously doesn't answer the call. Busy, this should be selected if the lead is busy and not interested in the service. And then essentially voicemail, you'll see here, this should then be selected if you reach the lead's voicemail. Lastly, completed, this should be selected if you complete the call and you need to follow up with the lead. And then that's essentially if you have arranged with that lead that you're going to call them back tomorrow at 2, for example, you would then select completed. What this then means is this then literally triggers all the automations in the background, which I'll show you now. So for example, there will generally be a couple outcomes off the back of the call. Step 1 is the lead scheduled discovery call. That's obviously the main goal. You would not need to do anything here. What would then happen is when the call is booked, you're on that triage call, you book in the actual call with that lead on the calendar. It would automatically move into the schedule column that I showed you in the pipeline, and then no future follow-ups would happen because you wouldn't need to reach out to them again. That's done. Second option, the lead has the possibility of booking a call at a future date. You would then just essentially mark them as completed, and then you would just move them along into the contacted follow-up section and add a task to follow up on a specific date. That's only if you had a call with them and they've said, look, ring me back tomorrow at 2, for example. Then the other option of the outcome would potentially be the lead didn't answer. In this case, you would select no answer, and then you would just literally move on to the next call. That will then allow the system to automatically update them and add them back into your calling list whenever you need to ring them next. Lastly, down at the bottom, the lead is a dead lead and has no chance of scheduling a discovery call. You would then select busy, and it will then automatically move that lead into the dead leads column, so we're not then ringing them. It means you can prioritize your focus on warmer, better quality leads. So for example, we have this system built out for every single day of the week in the pipeline. For example, this would be Monday. Let's say someone moves into the Friday column on the pipeline, and we then know that we're not calling at the weekends. The next time that we want to ring them is Monday. So this will then trigger when someone's moved to Friday. It will then wait one day and figure out, well, what's the day of the week that we want to call them next, or the day of the week that we want to call them next is Monday. So then what it does is it puts it into drip mode, so we don't just suddenly hammer everyone through into the calling system at once, because sometimes if there's a large amount of lead flow, the system can't process that quick enough. So we just use a drip mode, which then just adds one person every couple minutes, and then it adds them into the calling list. This then means that everyone is then updated accordingly. We then have this for every day of the week. So for example, if this was for Tuesday, if someone's moved into the Monday column, it waits one day, figures out what the day is, it would then go down the Tuesday column and then go into drip mode, and then add them into the manual actions down there. It then means that your calling list is always updated with the freshest leads for that day, so you can obviously prioritize the people and make sure the people that need to get called do actually get called. What we then want to do is the leads that then book in a sales call, we obviously then don't want them getting followed up again. So we have another system when a call is booked, your sales call is booked. If it's essentially come from cold calling them, what this will then do is it will mark them as the scheduled column on the cold calling board and remove them from any future cold calling automations. We don't want this to trigger if we just book a normal call. So what we want to do is we then want to make sure that this call has come from cold calling, and we can update them. What it then also means is we can then track the analytics, and ultimately with anything in business, we want to track it based off data, not emotion, so we can then see that this is actually working as opposed to potentially not working. So we can then eventually see how many calls were made, how many calls were booked off of those triage calls, and then we can see if those clients signed up, so we can eventually see the value in all of that. And that simple process we've used with numerous different clients and in our business to essentially outbound to thousands of leads in a day without ever reaching a bottleneck of not being able to call leads. And the cool part about this is the number that we add onto the system can be specific to the country code that you're ringing from. So if you're ringing Australian leads, your number could be ringing from an Australian number. If you're ringing US leads, it could be ringing from a US number, and etc. This then means that your pickup rate's probably going to be the highest possible as well. And because you're re-ringing leads numerous times, it means you're always going to have the highest probability of getting an answer as opposed to just ringing them once and never again.